Welcome to another episode of Gratitude, everyone. And we are so excited for our guest today and so happy to have Ben Fung on the podcast. So thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And for the people who are listening and are like, who is Ben Fung? Can you just give a brief background? I know you've probably said this a bajillion times, but what got you into PT in the first place?
So before, when I was a young warthog, shout out to Lion King, I was an engineer. I was a biomedical engineer at UCSD, and I'm from San Diego, so I kind of just stuck around the home hub. And I didn't like it. I was good at it, but there was too much engineering, not enough people. It's one thing to hang out with, people, and there's another thing to hang out with like DNA strands and cells. So I decided to do something a little bit more human and decided to bartend. But most people said that I couldn't necessarily be a university graduate, bachelor's engineer and stay as a surfing bartender for the rest of my life. So eventually I volunteered for a PT clinic. I ended up actually, years before, having sustained a common ulnar fracture, had PT and OT. It was insane, just this crazy break of an elbow. And so I already had exposure to it, and I'm like, sure, I'll try out volunteering for PT clinic, got an aide position, got promoted, and then was happy there for a while. And then all the clinicians were like, you have to be a full therapist like us. All right, I'll be a full therapist like you. And I took anatomy from, a local college because they didn't have it for my undergrad. And I did the whole GRE thing, and then boom, got into school. So it was one of those part of my pathway, certainly very passionate for it. But I think there's a good segment of us third career PTs where PT kind of fell into our lap. We became passionate about it versus started with that aim, even as like a pre-PT or kinesiology. So that got me in there. And I mean, even in college, I sustained a crazy snowboarding accident. Ate it while carving heel, grabbed some moguls, went down way too fast, followed that fantastic parabolic arc downhill until I hit my lower back. And I want to say that I lost like a 50% disc height or something of that nature per the x-ray. And we all know how that goes. But all the NPs and PAs were freaking out. They thought I was like a spinal cord injury patient waiting to happen. And I was going to feel fine. I just couldn't walk for a while because it hurt too bad. And I also had like an eversion ankle sprain with that. But long story short is, it became a PT because much of my life path kind of guided me in that general direction. And I found it to be just a fantastic and rewarding profession to join. And then from there, my career progressed since into non-clinical realms, but that's probably for later in this episode.
Yeah. And I appreciate that because a lot of students listening are like second or third career students, and they feel very alone because not many people are talking about it. And can we just put like a timeline to your story? So when did you finish engineering? When did you start PT school, and kind of go from there?
So timeline is going to date me. Timeline wise, I finished engineering 05-06, which is gnarly to think about. And I took kind of a gap area because of the whole bartending and PT aid tech, office manager type roles. Finally got into PT school in 2007. I graduated from Zoo Pacific in 2009. So that's kind of the area. And to those listening that this is your second, third, fifth career even, this is becoming more and more common. And, I'm sure this is something that's talked about on your podcast in multiple episodes, but it's no longer just a straight shot that you have to take. I remember in PPS at the Wynn Hotel in Las Vegas, that was probably 4 or 5 years ago. There was a 50-plus-year-old third-year DPT student on his fourth career, and like doing the same trek everybody else is doing. No pun intended for those of you watching the video here. There's the bridge of the NCC 1701D Enterprise from Star Trek. He's doing the same thing, having to take the same prereqs, ages from school or a GRE, any kind of standardized test. and taking out loans, and with a family and with a mortgage. So it's no longer, normal is no longer the norm. I think is something that we're discovering, not just in our profession, not just in healthcare, but just for lack of better terms, the social circumstances or the social contract even has really, really changed in this 2020s.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you expect your life to look like when you graduated PT school?
I remember my wife asking me this, "What's your 5-year plan?" And that was it. It was I would work for 5 years, hopefully in a sports med outpatient type setting, and then open my own practice and live happily ever after. That's what I expected my life to be, and my life has been anything but that. But all for the best. I wouldn't understand life if I wasn't on the road I am now.
And speaking of, so what are you doing now, transitioning out of the clinic? And let's start with the origins of when you were in that transition. What were your what were your thoughts when you're like, I don't know if I want to do patient care 40 hours a week and doing what you're doing today?
So I'm a weirdo, and I mean, my career path is already kind of strange. There's a small minority of us. I've identified a lot of engineers eventually become a PT for one reason or another, and so that's already a little bit odd. And we kind of see the world differently. For those of you listening, if you have engineering friends or engineers in your family, we're a little quirky. We're obviously a little nerdy. That's not going to be the last time. It's going to be like this is going to be like 8 more times. I'm going to do this on the background for those of you who can't see because you're listening on the podcast version. There's a green screen behind me, and I'm on the bridge of the enterprise as previously mentioned. But we're just quirky and we're a little weird, and we really like numbers and we really like facts and we really like processes and fixing things. And that fixing thing part really got me into clinical care. Like I was like, oh my gosh, I can fix people, that kind of thing. The idea of it, whether it's scientifically accurate or not, that's how I got into it. And my perspectives have since changed. And it wasn't that I was bored of patient care or was sick of it. It was that I was frustrated by glass ceilings. And no fault of my direct managers or anything of that nature. It really had to do with the system of employ that healthcare has adopted over the last 50, 60, 70 years, even since the 1950s, essentially. And it's followed a very traditional corporate America pathway. If you're in larger box offices, if you will, and otherwise it's a kind of a restaurateur style owner and manager kind of does everything if you're in a traditional small business private practice or your pre-enterprise. And so I was part of a hospital system. And even though I had done so much in the first 9 months as a new grad, I had shown up on TV. I had become a national speaker like overnight. I was, there's a couple, I should bring it over here. I won a company talent show, and then they made me a poster boy, literally at CSM 2013. There's this larger than life poster of me looking like an absolute 12-year-old. And then me standing next to it. You can probably find it on Twitter. Just look for it around that time date. And to me, that was normal because I knew nothing else, and that's a lot of how we perceive life is those heuristics. You have this understanding and you know nothing else until you experience something different, which is why it's nice to have a little bit of life experience and cognitive diversity surrounding you. But having hit all of those glass ceilings and realizing the system wouldn't allow me to progress any further, I sought advice from our hospital CEO, because I am just as clueless as I am gutsy. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what it means to walk into, CEO's office. I didn't know how important that is or how unimportant I might be or the anything thereof. I just was like, I'm angsty at where I am. The system needs to be fixed. Rah, rah, rah. So I go in there pretty much with the idea of asking for promotion and being humbled on the spot with way sage wisdom saying, look, you're a doctor, Ben. You have your DPT or a clinician, but you need to be more if you want to be more. It was almost too obvious. So he challenged me, be more than a doctor within the scope of healthcare. Do you want to be director of rehab when you grow up, essentially? Or do you want to be CEO of the hospital? Because I can see you taking my chair over, in the course of your career. And so that blew my mind. I was like, well, I didn't think that far. So he challenged me to go consider getting an MBA. And that's why I'm covered in Michigan paraphernalia, as I got my MBA from the University of Michigan, go Blue. It's also where I'm from in the Midwest. So, you know, more go blue pride right there. And that's kind of how I got started on this whole thing, you know, and that's as I got enrolled in the MBA program, I sought opportunistic promotions and got promoted outside of my organization. Did very well there in corporate management, but still wasn't good enough for me and wasn't good enough for them either, because that particular culture just wanted more. You know, I turned I think it took me less than 2 quarters to turn around a single into the division's most profitable program, even though it was in the most expensive place to operate in Southern California compared to, you know, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, you know, like not exactly the most, not comparatively more expensive to operate than in Southern California. So despite that, again, the system, it's not my direct boss was fantastic, and her boss was great as well, but the system itself had certain standards that were enforceable and needed to be enforced to run the business the way that it was known to run, that the board and the C-suite and the shareholders expected. So despite me having a newborn at the time, and I thought I did a really good job of systematizing my management, I wanted to be able to like shave a couple hours off here and there. They expected me to be there 8+ hours regardless of the results. So instead of just taking time off, which would have broken the department, you know, I decided to kind of hang tough and eventually resign my post in favor of family time. And that kind of launched me on my journey of where I am now.
And to put a timeline to it again, when did you get your MBA then? And all of that, you know, you were working in as a new grad. When did the MBA come in there?
So new grad 09, 2010, right? I actually enrolled for an MBA in 2012, graduated with it in 2015, which was actually the year that UpDoc was formed, which probably I'm most known for is UpDoc. The brand name UpDoc Media, formal, right? Winter formal, formally UpDoc Incorporated. And then later on, co-founded Recharge Modern Health and Fitness out in Howard County, Maryland. That was 17, I think it was. So yeah, the years fly by.
That's amazing. And just to see, you know, the timeline and the journey, like looking back, because 2009, 2010s, I mean, 10 years ago, that's just, it's wild. Now we're recording this in May 2020 during a pandemic. And it's just, it's insane. So
yep.
when you started UpDoc, what was your vision for UpDoc and your expectations of what you wanted it to be?
I got to credit the vision to my co-founder, Gene Shirakabrad. He's our CEO, and is what I consider to be a typical CEO. Visionary, you know, thinks very, very far ahead, has ideas for what can and should be versus how things are. And I'll self-admit, you know, I have visions of my own, but my strengths are really in the day-to-day, and the short-term strategics, or you can even consider it to be it's a contradiction in terms, but like strategic tactical maneuvers in business. Tactics are usually seen as one-offs, you know, like moment by moment, but even in like personality surveys, in getting the MBA, you know, it showed me thriving in an area that's really more in the helm of like a COO or a CFO or a chief strategy officer, or like an executive vice president or president role outside of the CEO or chairman of the board in the corporate structure. So, you know, really the vision was Gene's, creating the first digital media company for physical therapy by physical therapists. And since then, we've expanded, you know, the co-founders and all the team. We really expanded that dream, that vision, into being the leading edge media marketing and business development firm for healthcare education and technology. So that's really the space we aspire to exist in now.
I think what you guys have created has been incredible. And what do you kind of envision it to be in the future? I know, here we go, 5-year plan again, but what do you envision it to be coming soon?
Well, I feel like the vision, the mission remain the same. It just expands and progresses, evolves with the various iterations as the marketplace and as our society evolves. I think on the media side, we're really well known for our industry reports, stuff like the Job Market Pulse, the industry surveys, our Amazon bestseller, the Physical Therapy Prospectus. I think that was like an 18 publication. We recently released the Productivity Survey Report 2020. That was really fun. And a little earth shaking and a little unnerving even, some of the results, and just seeing like how little and how much some clinicians are required to do. Like on both sides, like how do you keep it together versus how do you keep it together financially? And I think the future will remain on that path. The media division of UpDoc has always been leading brand standard of trying to show the way true north for our profession and for these three verticals, for healthcare technology and obviously healthcare being our roots. That's where we kind of stand. I think that on the marketing side, we're continuing to be or aspire to be that leading edge data driven marketing firm with the ecosystem approach, very clinical in that you don't just do one thing, or you don't just do automation well or ads well. You have to do all of it well to have a consummate result, just like you have to do all of it well as a clinician to have a consummate result for your patients. And if anything, the expansion will be on the business development side. That's something that I personally have a huge passion for. Obviously, with my formal training with the MBA, I think we stand to really influence a lot of growth and positive wavelengths in our world, in not just PT, but healthcare at large. We're really seeing, especially in this pandemic, now that we mentioned it, open that Pandora's box, haha. Dad jokes for days. Probably not too funny, it's too soon. But, it's really there that I see a lot of the future of our company influencing positive growth. We're seeing, nurses, physicians, physical therapists, respiratory therapists, OTs, SLPs, everybody kind of coming, raising their standard and really trying to push the boundaries of what practicing atop a license looks like. And we're realizing in healthcare that it's not just your license and scope of practice. It's almost like you're all responsible for understanding everyone else's thing, but you're also hyper responsible for being the best at what you do. It reminds me of like a martial arts or even a chess alliteration. Like everybody has a favorite, opening in chess, but you're still responsible. Like you might have favorite attacks, but you're responsible for all the defensive structures. Same with healthcare. Like a really good nurse knows what everyone else does, but they're all really good at what they do, because by being there, they can point the arrow to which provider is the right person at the right time for that particular patient's circumstances. So I really see that and augmenting and pushing that vision and understanding and mindset, culture even forward in healthcare is where UpDoc will see quite a bit of thrive. And there's a lot of potential. I mean, you can talk about it from a human capital standpoint. You can talk about it from an organizational excellence standpoint. You can talk about from a systems and management systems and organizational excellence. I think I already said organizational excellence. And I think financing will figure itself out. I mean, right now is probably the weirdest economic times in the last literal 100 years since the Great Depressions. So I think the finances will figure itself out as the will of the people kind of dictated to be right and true. But I think, on UpDoc's stance, what we really want to do is help people live their best lives in the success of their businesses and their careers.
I love that. And how has it changed during the pandemic with everything? Like, how have you guys maybe shifted what content you're putting out, or maybe the direction, since everything has kind of totally changed, right? Our world is very, very different than March 1st of 2020.
Yeah, no, things are different. I could speak to more changes at Recharge just because it is a brick and mortar location, but we had been building digital systems for our members, our health members, for quite some time. So it didn't shake us as badly as we would have been, anxious for. On the UpDoc front, things have actually progressed well. Not that we saw this coming miles away, but we've always came with this idea that UpDoc needed to master ecosystems, not platforms. You can't be platform dependent when it comes to media and marketing. You just can't. we saw this, back in, I think, 17, when Google decided to penalize everybody's pop-ups, and all of a sudden, on the patient acquisition front, all the pop-up driven, take your health quiz, download my ebook thing, like that went away. 2018, I think, was when Facebook dumped all of their metrics because they realized they were wrong, and then they like flushed all these ads out because they were targeting people by demographic and identity, and Facebook didn't want that. So now you had to be an expert copywriter and not just an expert keyword targeter. And for some people, like Facebook all of a sudden overnight became a non-thing. Like you couldn't use it to market for new patients because all your patients were on Instagram, and all those patients from Instagram actually came from Snapchat. So it was one of those things for UpDoc where we've always took it upon ourselves to be a master of systems and strategies over platforms and tactics, and wanted to make sure that however we were servicing our clients, that we would be able to pivot them on a dime if required. And we did. I mean, we shifted a lot of serviceable windows away from social media posting and running digital ads for brick and mortar patient acquisition immediately to digital appointments and digital visits, because that's where everything was. Nobody could leave home, but people were still hurting at home. People still had neck aches and back aches, probably more because we're all sedentary. And people needed to find a way to connect, if anything, just for mental health and emotional health, not just physical health, for like fitness classes. So it has affected us in where we put our focus, but I usually use the metaphor of a sushi bar. I love sushi, so there's that. But B, it's a perfect example because a sushi master will make you a wonderful meal, regardless of ingredient or tools, right? And that's really where you have to see business systems at, is regardless of material or tools, do you still have a product? Do you still have a system? Do you still have a company? And if your company is reliant on materials and tools, then you are very, very vulnerable. And so, it's like, what was something else that broke down recently? Like email marketing has recently changed since the pandemic because there's been a lot more phishing and spam scams out there. And so Google Mail, Gmail being one of the biggest general consumer providers, have really tightened down their email filter. So many clinic emails are going to spam. How do you breach that? Do you go back to SMS, or do you go to like direct platforms like FB messaging or WhatsApp or Line app? So a very, very long-winded way of saying, because we've held to that sushi master model, the sushi bar model, it's not about, do I have the right rice or fish, or do I have the right knife? It's what meal do I need to create right now, next week, next month, next year? And I need to sharpen my skills surrounding that. California rolls might be popular today, but maybe crunchy rolls are popular tomorrow. Do I have the skill set to craft that regardless of, again, the materials or the tools involved?
Love that analogy. And for all you sushi lovers out there, it's
we're all buying sushi now.
We're all buying sushi.
It's all over takeout. This is not the first time this has happened on a podcast or a webinar. Like I was on an Embodia webinar and same thing happened. I was like, oh, we're getting sushi tonight.
Yes. But yeah, no, it's so true. And just, as the market changes, then you have to adapt and be flexible. And like you said, there's so much right now that's just ever changing, and we still don't know where we're going to go from here, but it's just what we can focus on and what's, in our present time. But yeah, that's really awesome. And I know you mentioned Recharge. So you said that's a brick and mortar practice. And so how did you get involved with Recharge? Was that with different owners as well, or was there like some sort of connection there?
So we share officers and co-founders. So Gene Shirakaba and myself. He again is CEO, very well positioned to do so. I took the CFO helm just because I was out here in California, and the location is in Howard County, Maryland. Dr. Ryan Smith, he came down to Maryland to take this chief operating officer helm, and has been doing a fantastic, just, hands down, incredible world-class job at building a true health member management experience out there. So From the outside in, when we first launched, we had a CrossFit affiliation just to help with the marketing effort. We've since let that go, and we're just Recharge now, a modern health and fitness membership company. And so our idea was to really not necessarily fix healthcare, because that requires way more pieces, but to show by example, maybe to again point the compass needle north, maybe to be a beacon or torchbearer, something lighthouse, and to show what a proactive approach to healthcare could look like. Instead of going, oh, you're out, oh, you're sick, oh, you're coughing, oh, the tummy hurts, now we do something, is to take track of biomarkers on a high risk, moderate risk, low risk, or healthy index across multiple metrics, and get people from a high, get people from low health, high risk, to high health, low risk. And so we do share some executive officers. It's investor backed, and has been evolving quite quickly in the years of operation. And it's been incredible to see, just because a lot of technology has changed, the marketplace for consumers has changed. There's a strong market that I hope physical therapists will take advantage of people that don't necessarily want to receive exercise or fitness instruction from a personal trainer. They want it from a clinician, because a clinician can understand both sides. How do I get myself well tuned and also while I do it?
Exactly. And I really like that. I love what you guys are doing over there. And what does a day in a week, or a week in a life of Ben Fung look like today?
Oh man. I mean, it can be anything. It really can. Usually mornings are spent with my son. I'll make him breakfast, spend some time with him, read with him, and then I'll attend to morning communications with clients, team calls, various client conference calls, and then execute on client deliverables. Usually, in a week, something like this will happen. I'll jump on a podcast or a webinar. I'm just happy to contribute to the community. And then I'll find time in the week to care. So in 2017, I think it was, I started running, like a middle-aged runner, and found that it was really fun. All my life, I liked being a sprinter, and more in the combat arts department of fitness. But now I'm really much a runner, rocker. Kettlebells was part of my initial clinical journey. Published a thesis on it that was recognized with the American College of Sports Medicine. So it's kind of fun tie into Recharge back when we were still CrossFit affiliated. And it became, it just kind of embedded parts of my life in that fashion. And and so that permeates. I'm opportunistic with that. And then, the day is kind of like, the day is almost never done, but you have to choose for it to be done. Sometimes I'll work very, very late into the evenings. Other times, and most of the time now, especially since the pandemic, to just take care of myself, I'll try to set some hard times of, now I have to unplug, put the phone down, read a book, play with cards, or play chess online, or play chess by myself because I'm a nerd like that, do something of that nature. And so it's very sporadic and opportunistic. There's really not any set schedule. Sometimes I'll have the opportunity to essentially sleep in as an adult, which is fantastic. I recommend it for everybody, only because of the different time differences, and there's certain things I can push forward in terms of work deliverables, and I can schedule team calls in that fashion. Other times I'm up very, very early, being on the West Coast with some East Coast clients that before office hours, their time. And so, if I can't coordinate it with team members that are out on the East Coast, then I'll have to take those calls. And that's kind of the life I chose, per the Godfather. This is the life we have chosen, or this is the business we've chosen. And, but as much as it sounds like I'm taxed all the time, I'm also very, very free. There's plenty of times in the past where I've taken a consulting call from Disneyland, or I attend to client communications, doing something fun, hiking, or at the beach, walking with my family. So it's really one of those things of, if you've gone down the entrepreneur startup route, if you've been in small business for a while, that everything's always on. Nothing's ever truly off, which is why you have to choose your on and off windows very, very intentionally. Otherwise, it's too easy to tip one way or the other. Either you get no work done, or all you do is work, and your life becomes kind of a mess. The home front's a mess, your health is a mess, and then that will cause your company to be a mess at the same time.
That's something really important to bring up, because a lot of people right now, especially students, are thinking, wow, I have extra time on my hands. Maybe I could do my own thing. And then they run into that problem and they're like, oh my God, I'm either always on or, just feeling like you should always be on. And it's this constant like productivity guilt and feeling like there's always more to do. And it's very difficult for people to handle.
It is. I mean, like, I would say some of my favorite classes. I mean, the MBA was transformational for me, mostly because I was self-admittedly the world's worst business person before getting the MBA. Like, I needed it. I feel a lot of PTs don't need the MBA, but like I needed it because I didn't know business. I just didn't. And one of the courses that was part of my major track, I think they called it a concentration track, was an advanced business strategy course on organizational excellence, organizational behaviors, what it was called. And employee wellness and self-care was a big emphasis in that, and how that affects workplace culture, how that affects workforce productivity. And there's a lot of cool, like mostly in the tech field, examples of how, like, Friday is like casual Fridays, and also you can just show up to the office and do anything you deem would be even remotely productive. And your whole day might be spent playing Xbox and ping pong. That's okay, because creative things will get done so long as you've done the business deliverables on Monday through Thursday, or however that works. So, in terms of like productivity guilt and whatnot, I really think that, especially as licensed professionals, we tend to hold this, it's drawn from the phrase holier than thou, but it's more professional than thou. I mentioned this on the Duck Legs podcast, of how, it's almost like we as healthcare professionals feel like we need to be unshaken by this pandemic, right? Like, no, I'm good because I'm licensed and I'm a doctor. Right. And like, no, like, because you're licensed, because you're a doctor, because you're a nurse, because you're a frontline clinician, like respiratory therapist, you're dealing with hell and beyond on earth right now. So it's absolutely okay not to be okay. And similarly, if you're locked in because right now your employment categorization, or because you're a student, you feel like you're being unproductive, it doesn't mean you're being unproductive. This is a very, very good time to take care of yourself. Like, I don't even know how I survived being a student more than once. Like, I remember in PT school, it's very physically unhealthy time for me, just because I didn't have a good understanding of time efficiency. Not that I wasted time, I just didn't know how to block it properly. Like, you would wake up, barely with enough time to make it to school, right? Take like 4 shots of espresso, show up, starve, go scrounge for food at 12, practice your practicums, sit through another 4 hours of lecture, go starve again, scrounge for food somewhere else, right? Try to work out, and now you're sugar low, and you're there, sitting through you're sleeping in, because everybody does. Come on, we can admit it, right? Some poor private practitioner is trying to get an emeritus or professorship at the DPT things, or they're teaching ethics or business management. Nobody's really there. They're not even really there. And you have this guilt, but what I would really say is, you take a look at that, right? You still go home, or to the library, or to Denny's, and you study until 11, 12, or 1. You go home, you have 4 hours of sleep before you repeat that again. It's not a very healthy lifestyle, right? You think about that. It's just not very healthy. So I really encourage everybody in this pandemic, feeling locked in and cooped up. This is a really, really good time to invest in you. There's been times in my life where, for one thing or another, like, I've lost hair, I've developed acid reflux through stress and not enough sleep. There's also the opposite, where I was physically too active, and I would surf for like 3 or 4 hours at a time and then be blown for the rest of the day, but I felt, like, spiritually fed. So really, not to be corny, but it's a balance. But the balance isn't necessarily what you think. It's not equal parts in kind. It's the right parts at the right time for what you might need. And it's very similar to a toddler's diet, like watching my kid grow up. When he was a toddler, there'd be days where all he ate was protein. I'm just like, oh, this is gonna be a bad day tomorrow, right? And then all he would be eating is carbs and fiber for the next 3 days. And it's just like, but that's how they do it. That's how their bodies are programmed to be. And I feel like maybe that's what we need to take a look at for ourselves now, is instead of having productivity guilt, is look, because you might be able to work on something. Maybe you can launch your own business or your own brand right now, but is it the right time or thing for you to do? Maybe this would be a good time for you to pursue some of these personal enrichment things that you've always wanted to do. And it would be a great regret if you didn't right now. You know, like I'm picking up the guitar again. You know, I bought a tournament grade chess set because chess was something I've always wanted to learn and I've always been awful at, you know, and, you know, stuff like that. You know, maybe you want to get into, you know, cooking. Maybe you want to stay away from bread making right now. You know, whatever the case is, this is a good time to work on you, you know, to read some books, to listen to podcasts, to exercise, you know, intentionally, not just because you have nothing else to do, but to work on some of these things. I really recommend a lot of people to work on public speaking right now. It's a perfect time. Everybody's relegated to the Zoom thing or any kind of video chat. Now is a very good time to practice some of these skills. Yeah, I even mentioned it in the white paper that we published at UpDoc for digital appointments. You know, everybody's shifting to that. It's a whole nother setting for clinicians. We were never taught in school how to engage with a patient in this medium, how to look in the camera without looking all over the place or look down. Like this is the other thing, right? Clinicians always look at, so how's your shoulder feeling, right? They always have this like pushed forward look, like, and all you're seeing is the top of their head because it's an etiquette that we weren't taught, right? And we don't know how to do distance examinations or to do subjectives in this fashion because we're so used to looking at physical cues of body language and stuff, you know, and now we have to pay that much more to intonations and different types of very like microfacial posturings that somebody might do on screen because somebody might only be in this part of the screen because they're holding things in a portrait view. So, you know, again, long-winded way of me saying, you know, professional production guilt, feeling like you should be doing something just for the sake of doing something is a great way of wasting your energy. You know, there's so much to be said about rest. And I think this is a very good time to do it.
Everybody rewind that whole part because that was just golden and 100% spot on, especially for all you students listening out there. Like, we've all felt that productivity guilt, but like, I just totally resonated with that. And it's just putting it in a different light, and take time to rest and invest in yourself, especially with personal development. Like, read a book. If there's a book you've always wanted to read, you're like, I'm too busy because I have school, then this is the time to do it now. So thank you for touching on all of those points. And we've talked about so much in this episode thus far, but if you had to give one piece of advice for a current SPT, what would it be?
I would say my biggest piece of advice is to have dual set goals. You know, I struggled in undergrad. This is no secret. It's out there somewhere, like multiple channels, you know, whether it's blogs, interviews, podcasts, webinars. I graduated as like a delayed 5.5 year from UCSD with a 2.8 GPA. Pretty much unconsiderable for graduate school these days. Thankfully, my faculty at Azusa Pacific took a bet on me. I actually ended up graduating. I'm looking at my cords right here. I graduated with honors. And twice, second time with the distinction, which is another version of honors, depending on your institution, with the MBA. So I'm not saying that to brag. What I'm saying is you have to have two parallel goals as a student. And it took me only until graduate school for me to figure out how to do that correctly. You do it this way. 1, get through the now. 2, focus on the end goal. And it's very much like a runner would, like a cross-country runner. If you have to like get over a hill, that hill is gonna suck. Oh, it's gonna suck. Like, I run around my neighborhood here and there's like a 300-foot drop down. Like, it's a crazy grade run where I run. And like, sometimes I think I'm actually slower running up this hill than walking. Like, it's that steep, but I choose to run because I know it's a better exercise for what I'm trying to do and develop physically. And so certain courses, certain times, certain exam weeks are going to feel like that uphill run where you feel like I would be faster walking backwards on this thing. But you have to choose to face forward because we tend to go where we look, right? And you're kind of blind if you're walking backwards because that's really a moment of retreat and resignation. So you have to really focus on the here and now. And it's Star Warsy, right? It's you know, Master Qui-Gon Jinn. You have to focus on the here and now, Obi-Wan. And whatever that might be, whatever you're struggling with, like struggled a lot in neurophys and in peds. I remember like that took me way long. I wasn't around that many kids. And so like the developmental stages made no sense to me. Very, very envious of all the parents that were part of my cohort, because they all like, oh yeah, very perfect sense. They're rolling it, 5 months, perfectly fine. Like they get it. Like I have one rolling now. I hate you. It's just, everybody has a different life phase. So focus on the here and now and what you have to do to get through it. Be laser focused on that. But as you lose momentum, as you lose spirit, as you lose motivation, which everyone does, and it's normal. I think it's very easy, especially in the Instagram influencer age, to see only the highlights of somebody's life and be like, oh my gosh, they have it so together. Like, how are they so put together? They're up at 5 a.m. working out. They're doing meditation. They're reading at night until 1 a.m. They have 30 podcasts, 100 blogs, and like 50,000 subscribers. Look at me. I have like no subscribers. I don't even have a website. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I'm worthless. Like you get down this route. And you have to really remember what your end goal is in those moments. And that's why I mean parallel tracks. Like I know in my runs that in the moment, that hill's going to suck. But I also know I'm going to go home and I'm going to be able to eat a fantastic meal and enjoy family time after that run. And so you have to have those two pieces in mind of what's my immediate destination, but also we mentioned this also, where's my true north? So your true north for the moment is going to be graduation. What are the do or die steps you have to take to graduate? But then also looking past that, like how in this pathway can you also keep a track of a meaningful career path? How do you develop your resume and your personal brand as a student? And you don't need to have a podcast or a YouTube channel or huge Facebook following or like a humorous Twitter handle or something like that. You don't need to have the world's best PT, Tumblr, or Pinterest. Like you have to be you and know who you are and know your value and be able to put that both on paper, but also, there's going to be a lot of job interviews that are going to look like this, or already has been since pre-pandemic, pre-lockdown. So have all those things in mind. But if push comes to shove, make it over the next hill. From there, take a look around, take a breath, do some of that self-care, and I mean, that's what I did in PT school. Was every single Friday I would drive down from Los Angeles, rain, traffic, end of the world. I'd make it back home and I'd find myself surfing Saturday morning, just because that's what I needed to do for self-care. And I would spend almost all of Saturdays just resting. And then I would drive back on Sunday. And I think I would study for 2 or 3 hours on Sunday, but then I would really pack most of my studying on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So when you have that kind of certainty is the great healer for anxiety. And as a student, you have so much anxiety. So if you create certainty touch points within your week, that's going to help you tremendously.
Lots of good points and rabbit holes that I want to go down, but I'm going to just ask one more question.
Sure.
So for all the students right now going through this, Gabby and I are I consider myself a second year. Gabby is officially a third year as of like last week. So
fresh third year.
Fresh third year. What do you see as the future of PT education and how it's going to change after this?
Well, I think the institutions that have the ability, again, we're talking systems, right? Like I think every educator knows what's wrong with the system of education. I'm quite the critique of the system and quite the fan, and I almost heroize educators just because I wouldn't be where I am without the educators. That said, I think that we're going to have to take a very honest look at the systems of education. What is truly valuable and effective at learning? I actually just dropped a dad blog on this that I haven't actually did any social sharing on, just because I was curious to see what would happen. But I essentially critique the education system for being ineffective at learning, because we've for so long have been obsessed with test scores, right? With grades and marks, that we're so afraid to fail that we forget to have fun with learning. And I feel like that's a huge part of just the human condition. So I think, what graduate schools, PT schools, let's be specific, are going to have to do is realize what is actually necessary. Of course, you have to have CAPD involved, all the regulatory bodies and all that jazz. But outside of that, how can we take some meaningful trailblazing steps on eliminating certain components of modern learning, make them a little bit more contemporary. Like there are certain things that you just have to do on site, like palpations. There's certain types of physical examinations you have to do on site. There's a lot of stuff that you can do at distance, asynchronously. My entire MBA was an online executive hybrid MBA. It was completely, well, not completely, but I would say 99% asynchronous, because I had classmates that I had to do collaborative projects with that were absolutely time sensitive and graded for. Somewhere in Italy, somewhere in Costa Rica, somewhere in Michigan, somewhere in New York, somewhere in Florida. I had one in Japan. So we would have to coordinate across all these zones of time around the world to put together, MBA level graduate projects and reports. And I felt like that was some of the most enriching times of learning I've ever had. So it proves to you that it's not necessarily the location or medium that matters, but it has to do with the experience of learning. And, I think we've seen that progress, especially in child development level education, right? The primary schools have done a really good job evolving with that, with certain school things, certain levels, or certain student things, certain levels of stimulation to really come into their own as a quasi-professional student, because that's really what we are now as a society. So I think we're going to see that. I think we're really going to have to examine the internships or the affiliations system. I think we really have to go into a preceptorship in certain settings, just like nurses have, where you have like 1 or 2 nurse preceptors to, like a small gaggle of nursing students, like 8 or 9 or 12 of them. Because some of that stuff, like those lessons are so precious that it's almost a little bit unfair for you only have one CI, because now you're robbed of the other CI, or, many students, like, so not every clinician makes a good CI, let's be honest, and not every good CI is the world's best clinician. So sometimes you have to watch somebody do their craft. Other times you need to learn from somebody who's great at conveying that craft. So often you see this in upper education, where you have like this genius professional, right? A profession, like triple doctorate, right? Like PhD, a DSC, DPT, and they're like borderline genius and insane. They understand the world like Neo understands the matrix and code, but you ask them to convey something at that high level and they just can't do it because it's not part of their makeup, right? And it doesn't mean that they're bad, right? Like it's like Wreck-It Ralph. It's not that they're a bad guy. They're just bad at teaching that particular piece of material in that context. So I think that the education system is really going to have to take a look at a lot of that stuff, asynchronous, at distance, virtual learning platforms and systems, and ways to gauge how good a student really is, even from the get-go. Because you look at somebody like myself or one of my compatriots, I had the second lowest GPA coming into my cohort, and a good friend of mine was the lowest. I know she doesn't mind me, I won't name her, but this is a story we share together. We actually graduated at the top, right? So these two, I'll call us kids, on academic probation, looking awful on paper, right? Like, how could we even admit them into a doctoring program? Ended up graduating at the very top echelons of the class, right? So what that really tells you is that there are things that are perhaps insufficiently measured by traditional graded metrics in school. And I think we're gonna have to really take a look at that. And I have this discussion very honestly, because there's a lot of clinicians that we find that graduate and we go like, how did you graduate, right? Like I don't know that you should be taking care of patients, no offense. Maybe you need to go back to school, as they say, right? And I think that's just part of the bell curve, right? That's life. But at the same time, I think there's so much that you can do to curb that. And there's also a lot of people that fail out in like anatomy or physiology or, like some of the more academic courses, but they have a tremendous gift and makeup to be a caring clinician, super high levels of emotional and social intelligence, but they never get a chance at it. So how do we make it easier on them? Because we know that, yes, they're going to need to know the anatomy, but no, none of us are going to have to memorize the periodic table for every single pharmaceutical out there, because it's going to be part of our EMR and I just search for it. So some of those reality checks are really going to have to be taken in play. And I think it starts at the admissions board. I think it's going to start at identifying how and why certain students succeed and don't succeed, and take a really careful look at the education system of what is and isn't necessary to produce that product of a consummate graduate, and what that looks like in the field.
So many good things. And I mean, online or education, it definitely, there's going to be a transformation. And I mean, we're seeing it now. We're hopefully going to see it for the rest of the year and beyond. So that's really good insight. And thank you for sharing that. But we know after listening to this episode, there's so many students out there who are going to be like, I need to message Ben Fung. Where do I find where he's at? Because I have so many things that I want to talk about. So where can people find you on social media? The best place to find you?
So the best place to find me, all my handles are at Dr. Ben Fung. So that's just DrBenFung. But most of my content you can find at updocmedia.com. So it's just UpDoc, like what's UpDoc? So UPDOC, media.com. And as a student, if you just look into our blog or just Google it, I think you can Google UpDoc Media Ultimate Student Resource Collection. You'll see it there. I think it was like a 2016-ish post, so it's pretty old. We've since updated it repeatedly. We kept the URL the same for SEO purposes. But there's a whole collection in there of stuff for students. There's negotiation blogs. There's free this and free that. The job market pulse is in there, which is one of our most popular reports at UpDoc Media. That shows you by zip code, specialty experience, and profession what normal pay, then air quotes, is for you in your area or areas that you're looking at, and settings, and travel versus not, and it's all broken down. It's crazy. There's a lot of that kind of stuff in there. There's a lot of mindset stuff that's very important, I feel, to students. A lot of how to craft your resume, how to interview, so much of those things there. So just look for it there, updocmedia.com, and search for the Ultimate Student Resource Collection. And I think that plus all the various call to actions that let you know you can connect directly with me is there. You can even text me. I put it out there. 470-BEN-FUNG is my mobile number. That's my business line. It goes right here. I get it. And I will respond. People get shocked, but I will respond. And Ben at updoc.com also if you want to email. But on social, it's just all Dr. Ben Fung. And don't be shy. This is
awesome.
Me.
Thank you so much for coming on today, Ben. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And have a great Friday and rest of your weekend.
Oh, thank you. Have a good rest of the weekend, Ben.
We appreciate it. Bye.